So we're starting a new series today called Being Rich. And this is going to be an important conversation. We're going to take 5 weeks to talk about it. And let's just start off like this. When you were a kid, did you ever think about or hope to be or plan to be rich? Right? So most of us probably at some point thought, when we were kids, we thought, we'd see a car, right? We'd say, when I grow up, I'm going to have a car like that. Or we would see a house, and we'd say, I'm going to have a house like that. Or we would go, we'd be watching TV or something, we'd say, I'm going to go there, I'm going to do that when I get older. And it's funny right now, because with our kids, we're creating vision boards, and so we're going through, we're asking them, like, what are the things that you want to do when you grow up, and the things that you want to be, and some of the places you want to go. And it's awesome to look at their vision boards, because the houses that they're going to live in are amazing, right? And the places that they're going to go are extraordinary. They're just, it's great, and I want my kids to think big. I want them to dream big. I want their vision boards to be just huge and over the top. I love that they do that. And yet, the truth is, sometimes as we get a little bit older, I just was talking with somebody the other day, and just this idea of, like, we all kind of hit a point in our life where idealism meets reality, right? And you're like, I'm going to live in a house like that, I'm going to have a job like that, I'm going to have a car like that, I'm going to live like that, and then all of a sudden reality sets in, you're like, oh man, I got kids, and like, I'll have to get to that later, right? I'll have to buy that house later. I'll have to live in that, get that car later, all right? Reality kind of sets in, and you're like, well, I'm not there yet, or maybe it's not even going to happen. Maybe I'm just not going to live in that house, or go to that vacation destination, or whatever the case is. Now, the truth is, if you stop and think about it, like, we have more than previous generations have. Would you all agree on that? Like, we definitely have more than our parents did growing up, and we definitely have more than our grandparents did. So, I mean, we've got a lot of stuff, but the truth is, most of us would not say, I'm rich. Right? Most of us would not use that word to describe our current state of living. And the truth is, here's the truth, we're not really sure what rich is. Right? Because it's a moving target. Like, there's no line that you cross that instantly makes you rich. So, for instance, I mean, it's not like you get a pay raise and you're like, boom, I'm rich. Like, within 24 hours, you move from not rich to rich. It just, there's no definitive line. And so what is rich to one person may not be rich to another. In fact, let me just show you, Gallup did a survey, because they were doing some research trying to find out what exactly is rich. Because in our climate, in our current cultural climate, like, this is a big discussion, right? Like, what is rich? What is enough? What's not enough? So they were doing some research, and let me just show you what some of the things they discovered. They said about 23% of the people, 1 out of 4 people almost, said that earning between $100,000 and $150,000 a year would be enough for them to feel rich. Right? About 23% of people said that. Well, listen, the truth is, there's people that are making that much money that would say, listen, that's not rich. That's just making it, all right? And then about 12% said, look, if I made between $60,000 and $99,000, somewhere in that range, that would be rich for me. And then there were 18% of those people who were interviewed said, look, I don't even need to make $60,000. If I made a little less than $60,000, for me, that would be rich. And they dug into the poll a little bit. They said about half of the people, 47%, said anything less than $150,000 just wasn't enough to cut it. Right? So, I mean, you can see there's diversity. It's all over the place. Some people are like, hey, just $55,000 a year, that's good. I'm rich. I mean, I would count myself as rich. Some people say less than $150,000, not even close. They dug in a little bit more. Let me show you this. 18% said they needed to make something between $150,000 and $299,000. 14% said they needed an annual income of somewhere between $300,000 and $999,000. The numbers go on and on, right? Let me give you this, because it gets even more interesting. Men have, according to their research, men have higher standards than women for what makes someone rich. The median annual income for a man was $150,000. All right, so most, like, the median annual income for all guys, $150,000 would make me rich. Ladies, their research showed, $100,000 would make me rich. Age played a difference. 18 to 49 years old said $160,000 would make me rich. those 50 years and older said $100,000 in annual income would make me rich. How about this? College graduates. I would need to make $200,000 annually to be considered rich. Those who didn't graduate from college said $100,000 is enough. On and on and on and on. In another research, they said people that were making $30,000 said if I could make $74,000, I don't know how they arrived at that figure, but if I could make $74,000 a year, I would be considered rich. I would feel rich. Now, there are lots of people making $74,000 say, dude, that's not rich, right? And then they interviewed people who were making $50,000, and they said, if I could make $100,000 a year, I would feel rich. And the top income earners said this: if I had $5 million in assets, I would be rich. To which we all say, well, duh, right? Of course, right? But you see, just in that little bit of research, rich is a moving target. What is rich to my little 5-year-old is her sister who has $45, right? What is rich to her sister is me, who has an emergency fund of $1,000 because I followed the Dave Ramsey plan, right? If my tire goes, I don't have to use a MasterCard because I have $1,000 set aside in case of an emergency. When my daughter sees that, she's like, oh my gosh, you're rich. Well, not really, right? I remember thinking as a young man, is studying for ministry, because ministry for most pastors is not a lucrative career. I remember thinking, if I could make, I had this thought, we were in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, first church, and I thought, if I could make $40,000 a year, that would be rich. Well, it's not rich, right? Especially when you have 6 kids. But the target is always moving, you see. It's always moving. And the truth is, you may actually be making the amount you dreamed of when you were a kid, and yet somehow now it just doesn't seem like it's enough, does it? In fact, you might actually be making more than you ever thought you would, and it somehow still doesn't seem like it's enough. And so what we want to do in this whole series is to help us think deeply about being rich, what it means, and how to do it well. If you're going to be rich, you might as well do it well, should that ever happen to you. And that's our hope, right? Like, there's nobody that says, my dream is to be poor, right? If that is your dream, they have pills for that, okay? So, all of us would say, sure, I want to do better. Sure, I'd love to use that word to describe my well-being. I mean, that would be a good thing, all right? So, St. Paul wrote several letters. We have 2 of them, access to 2 of them. They're in our Bible. And he wrote them to a young pastor named Timothy. And in this letter, at the end of his first letter, he ended with some instruction to Timothy about how he should minister to people who were rich. And this is going to be the launching point for our series. So let me just show you what St. Paul said. This is what it said. He said, teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Now, I've read this verse before, lots of times. And I have actually, a couple of times I've taught on this verse. But I remember when I first started reading the Bible, and I read that verse, my first thought was, this is not for me. Right? Paul was clearly talking to someone else. And the people to whom I thought he was talking were always the people that made more money than me. Right? That's who he's talking to. But as you read this verse, all of a sudden you begin to get a different perspective, because look what he says. Read this first line with me. Look at this. Read this with me. Teach those who are rich in this world. That's important. We're going to come back to it. He says their trust should be in God, who gives us all we need for our enjoyment. So let me just say this. Right now there seems to be a backlash against people who have resources, against people who have wealth. If you read through the scriptures, one of the things that you'll find is God gives us these things, and one of the reasons Paul says is for our enjoyment. Unfortunately, it used to be that if you had resources, if you had wealth, it was something that you could feel good about. Now, unfortunately, it's something to be embarrassed of. Now it's something that a lot of people seek to hide. And it's unfortunate, because quite frankly, it's an unbiblical perspective on what it means to be rich. But we can talk about that later. Let's move on. Look what else Paul said. He said, and this is what he said. If you're going to be rich, this is how to do it, right? Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up treasure as a good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. So a few years ago, a guy named Branko Milakovic, he wrote a book called The Haves and the Have-Nots. And in this book, he said that the global median income, does anybody have a guess at what the global median income is? $1,225 is the global median income.
Per year?
That's annual. That's what annual means. Right. Aren't you glad I came to church? Okay. Annual income, $1,225. Now, Tim Warstaff wrote an article in Forbes magazine. He said, the typical person in the bottom 5% of American income distribution is still richer than 68% of the world's inhabitants. In other words, the poorest 5% of people in America, the very bottom rung of income earners in America, is still richer than almost 70% of the world. Pretty crazy for us. Catherine Campbell was actually doing a book review of that book I just mentioned, The Haves and Have-Nots. And she wrote in her book review, she said, Americans, some of whom make as little as $6,700 annually, she said, now that's extremely poor by American standards, but that amounts to a relatively good standard of living in India, where about a quarter of the population lives on $1 a day. Again, even the very poorest of the poor in America are oftentimes, not always, but are often significantly better off, income-wise, than the world. Which is what St. Paul said. He said, listen, to those who are rich in the world, there's some things I want to say to you. And so what I want to do today, and this is in your notes, I want to give you some good news, and then I want to give you some bad news. All right? If we take St. Paul's instructions seriously, and we believe the research, which I've just shared with you, here's the good news. You are rich. You're rich, right? So let's just say this together. How about this? And we don't need to yell, but we can just say it together. We can say, I am rich. Go ahead and say it, right? I'm rich. Like turn to the person next to you and say, I'm rich. Y'all are laughing at each other. Like, no, you're not rich. Now, if you're still, listen, so if you're still in doubt about this, you're like, okay, all right, I'm not rich, right? So if you're still in doubt, let's play a game. Let's do this. According to the latest census, the median household income per household in Rock Hill, right? And like a household is defined differently than a family. A household includes all of the income earners within the house, okay? The median household income per household in Rock Hill is $48,481 a year. But let's just say, so let's say that you're the kind of like the median person, like you're kind of in the middle, right? You're not the high end, you're not the low end, you're kind of somewhere in the middle. And so let's say that your year just falls apart this year. Let's say that sickness hits your house, your marriage falls apart, your income tanks significantly, and well, first of all, we're just going to have a prayer meeting for you right now, okay? But this year, you only bring home $32,000, all right? Let's say you only bring home $32,000. There's a website called globalrichlist.com. We're actually posting a link to it on our Facebook page today, facebook.com/mychurch180. You can type in your income. But here's what I want to do. I'm going to throw this up there on the screen. globalrichlist.com, all right? And we're going to put in $32,000, all right? $32,000. You live in the United States. We're going to enter in $32,000, all right? And let's see where you rank in the world. If you make $32,000, that puts you in the top 1.03% of the richest people in the world. If you make $32,000 in a year, that makes you the 61,909,966,000th richest person in the world. If you make $32,000 a year, in 1 hour you make about $16.67. While in Ghana, the average laborer makes 8 cents an hour. If you earn $32,000 a year, it would take the average laborer in Zimbabwe 31 years to earn that same amount. If you make $32,000 a year, it would take you 2 minutes to earn enough money to buy a can of Coke. The average laborer in Indonesia would have to work around 2 hours to gain that same thing. If you make $32,000, your annual income could pay the monthly salary of $106 in Azerbaijan. I actually practiced that this morning. Doctors in Azerbaijan, there we are, Azerbaijan. I just researched this. They make $300 a month in Azerbaijan. That comes after a raise. If you make $32,000 a year, your annual income could pay the monthly salaries of $106. To those of you who are rich in this world, that's us. We really are rich. So let's say that you had a really good year and you doubled your income, right? So average income in Rock Hill, the median income, household income is $48,481. Let's say you had a really good year and you doubled your income. Let's look at what happens there. $96,000. We're going to type that in. Live in the United States, you're going to make $96,000. If you make $96,000 in the year, you are in the top 0.09 richest people in the world. That makes you the 5,266,173 richest person on earth by income. In 1 hour, you would make approximately $50. Meanwhile, in Ghana, the average laborer makes just 8 cents. In 1 year, you make $96,000. It would take the average laborer in Zimbabwe 94 years to make the same amount that you make in 1 year. Again, $96,000 a year, it takes you a few seconds to earn enough to buy a can of Coke. We think, listen, we have enough change laying around in our purses and in our glove compartments and in the middle of our console of our car to buy a Coke. However, in Indonesia, they would have to work 2 hours to buy that same can of Coke that we think nothing of. If you make $96,000 a year, your annual income could pay the monthly salaries of 320 doctors in Azerbaijan. Is that not crazy? I mean, here's the good news. You're rich. You really are rich. We have so much. And can I just say, listen, to those of us who are rich, there's a word that should not be on our lips. There's an attitude that should not be on our lips, and that is the attitude of complaint, or grumbling, or discontent. When we consider where we are in comparison to the rest of the world. Sometimes I think we compare ourselves too closely. We look next door. Paul says, to those of you who are rich in this world, there's some things I want to say to you. So the good news is this. You are rich. Say it one more time. I am rich. I am rich. Now, the truth is, probably no one in this room feels different. Like you just said, I'm rich about 3 times, but you probably don't feel any different. Like none of us are like, oh, well, that's great. I'm just going to leave here. My whole life is entirely different now because I am rich. I'm going to quit worrying. I'm going to take an extra vacation day. I'm going to just, probably very few of us actually believe that. Because, and let me just say, in this conversation, I'm aware of the fact that there are people who are having hard times. I'm aware of that. There are people who are struggling with medical bills. There are people who are struggling with employment. There are single parents. I'm very aware of this. And let me just say, my heart and our prayers go out for you. And yet, let me just say this. Most of us are doing okay. Even the ones who are not doing so well. Today, you're going to go home. You're going to get there by driving a car. which probably has air conditioner in it, and you're going to go into your house, which has a door on it, and carpet on the floor, and you're going to eat a meal, and you're going to pick what you're going to eat because you're open your refrigerator and there's going to be options there. And then you're going to sit in your climate-controlled house where you get to determine whether how hot or how cold it is. And you're going to watch one of your several TVs. You're going to change out of your church clothes into your watching TV clothes. And then you'll pick those watching TV clothes out of a drawer that's filled with other kinds of clothes. And you'll hang your church clothes in a closet that's filled with other clothes, or you'll dump them in a laundry basket alongside lots of other clothes. You realize there are people in the world who have one clothes. You're going to eat a snack probably while you're watching TV, and you'll probably choose that snack from a variety of snacks. And maybe while you're watching TV, on your chair or on your couch, you get to pick, because you probably have both. You'll probably multitask while you're watching the game on TV by engaging on Facebook. And at some point along the way, you'll probably grab your phone and you'll update your social media status on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And that's how those of us who aren't even doing so well in our culture live. The good news is, we're really all rich. Unfortunately, I think as we process this together over the next few weeks, the truth is most of us don't know how to be rich well. We don't know how to live rich well. And that's what we want to learn throughout the series. Now, you've got the good news, so let's just say it one more time. I'm rich. Say it, go ahead. I am rich. I really am. Compared to the rest of the world, I have so much stuff. So here's the bad news. You ready for the bad news? You are rich. That's the bad news. Interestingly enough, Jesus was having a conversation with a young man who was rich, and he was powerful. He was a mover and shaker in the community. He had a position of influence politically. He was looked up to. He was highly esteemed. He had a lot of stuff. And Jesus was talking to him about what it would take to be a part of God's kingdom, to be a part of God's family, to be a believer. Jesus was having this conversation with him. And after his conversation, this rich young ruler decided, I'm not ready to do what it takes. So he walked away from Jesus. And as he was walking away from Jesus, Jesus looked at this person and said, I really, really like this guy. But then he said this, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. In fact, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. Good news is you're rich. The bad news is you're rich. And this creates some complications. Now, there's some discussion about what Jesus meant when he said to enter into the eye of a needle. Some people say there was a small wall, a small entrance into the city through a small wall that was called the eye of a needle. It could be, arguably that could be true. But let me just show you this, all right? This is what the eye of a needle looks like. There are other scholars who actually believe this is what Jesus was talking about, the small end of a needle where we put the thread. Like, you couldn't even put your finger through there, could you? Like, could you stick your finger through the eye of a needle, that place where the string goes through? That's the eye. Could you do that? Of course not. Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle. In other words, it's virtually impossible for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich person to get into heaven. We're rich. Good news. We're rich. Bad news. Because that complicates our life, being rich, believe it or not. Let me show you the 3 ways that being rich can actually complicate our lives. The first thing is this. There's less of a perceived need for God. When I'm rich, I have less of a perceived need for God. I mean, think about this. Jesus taught us to pray. Our Father in heaven, give us this day our daily bread. When's the last time you prayed for bread? Here's probably what you needed. Here's probably what you did when you last needed bread. You sent a text to your husband and your wife, hey, we need bread. It wasn't an issue of whether or not you could afford it. It was just an issue of whether or not he or she was going to stop and get it. Quite frankly, most of us have never had to pray for food. Most of us have never had to pray for covering. Most of us have never had to pray for clothing or shelter. I have money for gas. We have some form of medical insurance. Honestly, the truth is, this is good, ready to listen to this, it is possible to live a fairly decent life materially without God. I know lots of people who do not believe in God who have a better life materially than I do. Nicer cars, nicer phones, nicer clothes, on and on and on. It is possible to live a really decent life materially without God. This is a complication that rich people, that we have to deal with. There's less of a perceived need for God. I'm not hungry, so I don't need to pray for bread. I've got clothes, so I don't need to pray for food. I've got a place to stay, so I don't need to pray for shelter. On and on and on the list goes. It's a complication that we have to look at. A second problem for those of us who are rich in this world is this: there's a greater distraction from priorities. And here's the truth: because we're rich in this world, we have rich people distractions. One major issue that most of us wrestle with is this: I'm just so busy. We just did a whole series called Making Space on that topic. If you missed it, I encourage you to go back, church180.tv, check out the sermons. But we are busy because we're rich. Think about the things we're busy. We have kids in sports. We have vacation opportunities. We have travel opportunities. We have multiple hobbies. There's nothing wrong with these things. It's just the things that rich people do. And they're distracting priorities. All of us would probably say that worshiping together, worshiping God, and being a part of a community of believers is a good thing to do. Most of us would probably agree with that. But lots of us can't make it regularly to church because we're busy doing rich people things. Richard Swenson wrote a book called Margin. It was one of the resources we shared with you from the last series. And in it he said, we've made tremendous progress in the material world. Wealth, technology, health. I mean, think about the things we have in the material world compared to what our grandparents had. Our wealth is at a different place. Technology, health. My girls literally yesterday, we were at a yard sale and they saw an old TV that had the dials. Remember those dials? You flip them on. And I asked them, what, do you know what that is? And they're like, no. Right? Technology, our kids don't even have TVs that have buttons anymore, right? Or knobs. Who changes the channel by moving across the room? No one. So we've made lots of technology, we've made lots of progress in the area of the material world. He says we've made lots of progress in the world of intellect. Knowledge, information, education were so much more advanced than they were, a century ago. He said, but all of this progress comes at the expense of our social world. Family, friends, neighbors, church. All of this progress comes at the expense of the psychological side of us, our feelings, our attitudes, our emotions. All of this progress comes at the expense of the spiritual world, the unseen and the eternal, God. We're so rich. And it's a good thing. It's good to be rich. We like that. But it brings with it distractions. We have lots of money. We have lots of stuff. We have lots of opportunities. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at our culture, the important things are falling apart. Divorce rate, the use of medication for stress, anxiety, etc. It's going through the roof. But we have lots of rich people opportunities. The third issue that rich people, us, we all in this room have to deal with is higher expectations. Some recent statistics that were shared by UNICEF, which is the United Nations Children's Fund. Let me just read to you. It says 16,000 children die every day in our world, mostly from preventable or treatable causes. Every day. 16. I can't even get my mind around that. That's more children than go to your local elementary school by thousands. That would be like an elementary school plus dying every day. They said there are nearly 230 million children under the age of 5 in our world who have never been officially recorded. Their name, nationality, they're just unknown. 230 million unknowns in our world. 2.4 billion people, can't even get my mind around that number, lack access to improved sanitation, including 946 million who are forced to defecate in the open for lack of other options. In other words, they don't even have a toilet. I mean, listen, gang. If we don't have a toilet, you know what we do? We just put our foot on the gas pedal a little harder to get to the next rest area, right? Because it's a rich people thing. We have access to this. And there are millions of people in our world who don't even have that. So they have to do their thing in the open, somewhere in a jungle, or somewhere in a desert, or somewhere. And we don't even think about pooping without a toilet. Out of an estimated, listen to this, out of an estimated 35 million people living with the HIV virus, over 2 million of those are kids who are 10 to 19 years old. Globally, about 1/3 of women ages 20 to 24 were children bride. They were married as children. How about this? Nearly half of all the deaths in children under age 5 are attributable to undernutrition around the world. Every morning, you know what my little girl does? She's like, Dad, I need my vitamins. Dad, I need my vitamins. Dad, I need my vitamins. Every single morning we have this conversation. I make sure my kids, every morning, they have at least an egg, and they have a piece of fruit or a bowl of cereal, and they get their vitamins. Like every single morning, my kids are cared for like that. And yet around the world, nearly half of the children who die because of a lack of nutrition. This translates into the unnecessary loss of about 3 million lives per year. Insane. Jesus looks at those of us who are rich and says, to whom much is given, much is expected. To whom much is given, much is expected. We're rich. We're really rich. Now, what do? I mean, there's so much to be done. I mean, I look at this stuff and I'm overwhelmed, like thousands and millions. These numbers are so big, and I look at my money, and I look at my income, and I look at my Excel spreadsheet where my money is. I'm like, how in the world am I going to do anything about this? Let me just give you a principle. This is a great principle for these kinds of conversations, and it simply is this. Do for one what you wish you could do for many. Do for one what you wish you could do for many. I mean, all of us, when we hear this, we say to ourselves, I would love somehow to get engaged and somehow to get involved and somehow to make a difference. Listen, there's no way that we can do billions or millions or thousands, but we can do one. And if many do one, if all of the rich would embrace one, think of what we could do. It's extraordinary what the church could do. If Christians, if you're a follower of Jesus, and we begin to embrace this idea that I am rich, and I am required to engage, and I can engage because, say it, I am rich. Yeah. So what if just these next few weeks we begin to acknowledge to ourselves that we have a lot of stuff. And we just had a yard sale at our house a couple weekends ago. And as we're pulling all this stuff to the curb, it was interesting because I began to process this, and I thought, the things that we're selling, like this was our conversation. We're going to try to sell at a yard sale. If we don't sell it, we'll take it to it. We're just going to get rid of it. Some of the stuff, honestly, as we're taking it, I looked at it like, nobody should even buy that, so I threw it away. And yet you realize the things that I sell at a yard sale, or I give to Goodwill, or I even throw away, there are people in this world who would count that as gold. The things that are stuck in my attic that I don't ever even look at, there are people in this world who would count that as gold. I'm rich. I have rich people opportunities. I have rich people luxuries. And the things that I don't even consider would be lifesavers for people in this world. What would happen if, as a church, every single one of us in this room would begin to, over the next several weeks, begin to buy into this idea that I actually am rich. I actually do have a lot of stuff. I have a lot of resources. I have a lot of things accessible, opportunities and resources available to me. And what if we would decide to refocus some of our wealth and maybe help someone? I saw the coolest thing yesterday. I wanted to take a picture and put it up here, but I thought it would be invasive. I saw a car that was broke down in the middle of the road, and then I saw a moped parked right beside the car in the middle of the road, and the dude who was riding the moped had the hood up and was working on the car. You know what I thought? Most of us look at that hey, there's a word. Would look at the guy, the dude on the moped, and say, he's poor. But he had something to give the dude who drove the car. Even the guy on the moped had something to give. We're all rich somewhere. So let me just ask you a question. I mean, some of you, just process this with me. What would happen if each one of us were to say, over the course of the next few weeks, say, I can't do something for everyone, but I can do something for one. And so, if you don't know where to start, let me just introduce to you something called the International Child Care Ministries. On this page, we're going to actually put a link to it on our Facebook page, facebook.com/mychurch180. There are children all over the world that each one of us could adopt. $30 a month. You know what $30 a month does? Let me tell you. A couple trips through Starbucks. A dinner with your family. Or with your spouse. Or if you eat at a really nice place, just for you. But what would happen if each one of us said, look, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna adopt a child. I'm going to invest in it. This is run through the Free Methodist Church, so it's safe. It's checked. It's audited, and it's a good investment. $30 a month. Or maybe some of you in this room are like, you know, I'd rather keep it a little closer to home. How about this? In our church, there's a little man. His name is Brian Lockhart. This kiddo has cancer. He's in the fight of his life. For the next year, this little man his body's going to be ravaged by chemo treatments as they fight off this aggressive cancer. His dad is a single parent. He's trying to navigate 4 children and a business. He spends lots of days traveling back and forth to the hospital with little Brian. What would happen if we just said, you know, I'm rich and I could bless this guy. I could do that. If you're interested in doing that, you can see me, or you can go online, church180.tv, and it clicks, and there's a link there where you can click give, and there's a drop down, we'll give you options. If you give to Care Team, we're using that money to help Brian offset his travel expenses, to supplement the crazy cost of doing this. We can do this because we're rich. There's all kinds of options available to us. Let me just wrap it up by saying this. A little bit ago, we read this. I read to you the words about Jesus when it came to rich people. How difficult it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Let me tell you what happened before Jesus said that. It's in Luke chapter 18. This religious leader, rich, young ruler, he approached Jesus and said, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life, to get into the kingdom of God, to be one of God's family? What do I need to do? Jesus said, look, you know the commandments. Don't commit adultery, don't murder, don't steal, don't lie, honor your father and mother. This guy said, look, I've done all these things since I was a kid. Like, I was raised in Sunday school, I did all this stuff. And Jesus heard his answer. He said, there's still one thing you haven't done. I want you to sell all your possessions, give your money to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. Now, just to be clear, Jesus is not opposed to wealth. Scripture isn't opposed to wealth. We just read from St. Paul. God gives us wealth for our enjoyment. And there's other places in the Scripture where it says the same thing. This young man, however, it was an obstacle to him. And Jesus knew, you, all of your life, have chosen being rich over God. I choose my stuff. I choose my wealth over God. And Jesus said, for you, friend, it's not a both and. It really is an either or for you. The young man heard this, and this is what he did. When he heard what Jesus said, Jesus asks for my whole heart, my whole life, everything. he became very sad because he was very rich, and he walked away. I'm telling you, there are people all around us, and it might even be you, whose relationship with God is dinged seriously because of your rich, because of your wealth, because of the things in our life. We all have it. We're all rich. As we move forward, here's what I want to do in just a second. I'm going to ask Fitz and the team to come up, and we're going to sing a song and just take some time to contemplate the love that Jesus has for us. But what he's asking us to do is, will you put me first? Will you follow me? Will you believe in me? Will you put me first? It's an obstacle, but it's not impossible to follow God closely, to be filled with the Spirit, to do the things that God says. The question he's asking is, will you choose me first above everything else? Will you do that? The rich young ruler said, I can't. And he walked away. But we have a choice. And we can say, I can, and I will. And this is our prayer. I'm actually going to just take just a moment. And we're going to pray together. And in these moments, I'm going to ask that God will put his finger on the things in our life that we're choosing over him. The resources, the opportunities that we're choosing over him. And that he will call us Father. In these moments, I pray in Jesus' name that first of all, you help us to see, I'm rich. To those who are rich in this world, there are some things that you want to say. That's us. We are rich. And oftentimes, Lord, probably most of us in this room have chosen our richness over you. Forgive us, God. What would happen if every Christian, if every person, even every person in this room began to believe this? I'm rich. I'm rich. Imagine what we could do in this world. Paul told us, he said, listen, I want you to be rich in good deeds. I want you to be generous. I want you to help those in need. God, we could do this. Imagine the difference your church could make if we begin to embrace the idea that I'm rich. Forgive us, God. As rich as we are, we complain so much. As rich as we are, we're so disgruntled. As rich as we are, we're so dissatisfied. Forgive us for this, Father. I pray that our hearts will be filled with gratitude. I pray that you'd be lighting a fire of generosity in our hearts. I pray, Lord, that we would begin to explore the idea, what could I do for one? Father, I pray that out of this church, the rich people in this church, all of us, would begin to put our hand to things, Lord. In the lives of those around us, the lives of those even in different countries, Lord, will be blessed because we're rich. Thank you for your blessing, God. Help us to manage it well. And as we move forward in these next few weeks, Father, I pray that we will open up our hearts to the leadership of Jesus. That we'll open up our hearts, Lord, to the very things that you want to say to each one of us in this room. We love you, Jesus. We know you love us. And I pray in these next moments as we sing this song, that maybe some in this room will begin to make decisions regarding the wealth they have accessible to them. This is our prayer in Christ's name. Let us hear these words of this song in Jesus. Amen.
All things have passed away. Your